Hi, my name is Lily and welcome back to my channel and welcome to my April reading wrap-up. So in April I read a total of 11 books and I will be speaking to you about most of them. So first up we have Hacked by Lucy Lennox and May Archer. This is the third book in the Licking Thicket Horn of Glory trilogy, so it brings it all to an end. This is a spin-off trilogy from the Licking Thicket series. This centres around the security team. I'm trying to remember what they're called, but I can't remember right now, but the security team that operates in Licking Thicket, and about their work with this games console company. So I can't tell you too much about the general plot of this book because it would be spoilers for books 1 and 2. This is not a standalone romance. These 3 books need to be read in the right order. This follows Hux, who is Champion Security's internet security expert and who does a lot of the comms for the team, isn't usually in the field, and then Kev, who is the cousin of the love interest from the first book, who is a freelance tech guy, has a lot of money but also is very seriously into gaming, and is an enemies to lovers romance. So this one I gave 3 stars and also 3 chilies. So for me, 3 chilies or 3 spice rating means that there are a few sex scenes that are quite explicit, but the book is more focused on the plot and the non-sexual elements of their romance. So this one was okay. I felt like the progression and the growth of the characters was not as good as in previous books, and I found myself a little bit bored. And I do feel like, as someone who works in tech, Lucy Lennox and May Archer did not do enough to make the tech side of this realistic or do any sort of research around it. I found that quite frustrating to read, but overall it's an okay read. If you're reading the trilogy, it's worth reading, but it wasn't my favourite in the trilogy. I did listen to the audiobook, which is by the usual Lucy Lennox narrator, and again, fine, good audio narration, but you will find that as you read his books or read his narration of her books, he uses the same 2 voices generally, but for this one there was I didn't feel there was enough distinction between the 2 voices, so I did struggle a little bit when it's a dual POV but with one narrator to know whose chapter I was in. Then I read Love and Gelato by Jenna Evans Welch. This is the first book in the Love and Gelato trilogy, but they're all apparently independent romances. This is the only one that I've read. This is a YA contemporary and it does have a romance element to it, but I would say this one especially leans more contemporary, with the romance being a side plot rather than the romance being the main thing in the book. This one follows Lena, who is moving to Tuscany supposedly just for the summer because her mother has just died, and she has been told that this man in Tuscany is actually her father that she never knew. So she is going there to spend some time with him to get to know him over the summer before she goes back to school. But obviously she's very reluctant, she doesn't really want to be there, and she would much rather be back in America living with her best friend's family. But this is about her going on a journey of self-discovery and dealing with her grief and trying to make friends with the fellow young people living in the area because her father is trying to get her to agree to stay for longer and go to the international school. This is really emotional. It is a lot about grief, a lot about abandonment, what it means to be a parent, and it is heavy. So there's a lot of sad moments in this, but there's also a lot of joy. We get to see Lena exploring Tuscany for the first time. The book pitches itself as an adventure through Tuscany, but it's not. She really spends most of her time in the cemetery where she is living, and then in Florence, which is the nearest city to that. So there's not really much Tuscany adventuring, and there's a lot of going to rich people's mansions in Tuscany, but it is mostly Florence and the cemetery. But I really loved it. It's beautiful. This was my favourite book in April. It will be probably in my top 10. I really need to watch the adaptation, although I've heard the adaptation is kind of more of a cheesy romance and has been made like more adultified, but I'm still interested to see what it's like. And yeah, I would highly recommend this. I don't normally read YA contemporaries these days, don't like them as much as most of my other genres, but this one I really, really do recommend. Then I read To Sir Philip with Love by Julia Quinn. I believe this is the 5th book in the Bridgerton series, but I could be getting that wrong. Either way, it is Eloise's book. This one for me was a 2-star, and it's my least favourite of the Bridgertons so far. I will preface this with a little bit of a speech that I think people need to hear. Book Eloise is not show Eloise. The Eloise you see in the Bridgertons series on Netflix is nothing like the Eloise in the books. Eloise in the books is very feminist for her time. But that's what you have to remember, feminist for her time. Whereas Eloise in the TV series is radical for her time. So Eloise in the books, her level of feminism is that she is very adamant that she's not going to marry just for convenience, for money, or because it will please anyone else. She wants to marry the right person and to marry for love and to have a good life. That is her level of feminism, okay? And she is not this sassy, spunky person that she is in the TV show. She is very, very different. She is perhaps the person who has changed the most when adapted into the TV show. So if you go into this book expecting to get TV show Eloise, you'll be very disappointed. I did not go into it expecting that because I knew she was different, because when you interact with Eloise in previous books, you can see she's a very different character to how she is in the TV show. So I wasn't expecting this sassy, punky, spunky kind of girl, but I found that the Eloise of the books was kind of boring, not because she wasn't TV show Eloise, I just felt like she was very two-dimensional. The romance I didn't really buy, I didn't really see why they were connected. And I think the big issue with this one is it follows Eloise and Sir Philip. So Sir Philip, his wife has died, I think a couple of years ago now. He has kind of grieved her, but she had this issue with mental health before she died. And he described her as this woman that never smiled, and how she was never happy. He never felt complete with her. He never really felt love for her. It was very much a marriage of convenience. And then he meets Eloise, who is this headstrong woman who will speak her mind, and he's kind of enamored with her, but when she arrives in person, they don't really know how to deal with this dynamic, and especially because he has these really wild, unruly children who will not listen to anybody. I just found that a lot of excuses were made for Sir Philip's behaviour, and Eloise kind of was just bowing to what he wanted all the time, and there was a lot of unhealthy dynamics that were not portrayed as being unhealthy. So anytime Eloise kind of portrayed a negative emotion, Philip would kind of freak out and act as though the world was going to end and he was going to have another really super depressed wife. And so she kind of promised at one point in the book that she would never be sad, and that is just so toxic to me, to like promise to never ever be sad and to always be smiling is just horrendous. And like that was how she calmed Philip down, and it was like a serious thing. And I just felt like the way they bonded was through letters, and we just didn't see enough of them. I wanted more of the book before Eloise runs away in secret to go and see Sir Philip. I wanted to see their relationship growing through these letters, see more of their back and forth, because we were kind of told a lot of it, like, oh, I heard this from his letters, but we never got to see the letters. And these letters are how they fell in love, and yet we never get to see the evidence of that, and we never get to see how they developed. And I think that really made it hard for me to invest in the relationship. So ultimately it was a 2-star read. For me, that means like a book that needs a lot of work, but if you're reading the Bridgerton series, you probably can read it, but honestly, you don't miss much if you decide to skip it. Then I read 8 Detectives by Alex Pavesi. This was for Amy's book club. This is a cozy mystery kind of... It's better if I just explain the premise. So this one is about a young woman who works for a publishing company who goes to this remote island, I think it's in the Mediterranean, to meet a man who wrote this collection of murder mystery short stories many years ago, and she wants to work with him to edit them to publish through her publishing company. And basically it's, I assume it's a series of 8 stories. I never actually counted, but that would make sense. But it's a series of mystery short stories. You read them, and after each short story, our female main character discusses it with the author, and it emerges that there's kind of little discrepancies with these stories. And you're told in the blurb that there's something suspicious about him, and she thinks there's something up, thinks he might not be who he's saying he is, that kind of stuff. And honestly, if that hadn't been said in the blurb, I would not have been suspicious at all. I didn't particularly enjoy any of the mysteries because I found it really hard to invest. There was no time to introduce you to location, to character, and there's a lot of discussion around the mechanics and the different kinds of mysteries you can have and the different kinds of characters in mystery books, which I found kind of boring to talk about. But I just found that I didn't have enough time to get invested in any of the individual mysteries, and a lot of them felt a bit too convenient, and the plot twists at the end of the book didn't really do much for me because I didn't care. And like I said, if I hadn't been told to be suspicious of him, I wouldn't have been. And so I think it kind of came out of the blue as a reader. So yeah, overall, it just really missed the mark for me. I gave it 3 stars just because I thought it was well written. I just don't think the idea was particularly good, which is why it lost some stars for me. Then I read A Good Girl, Bad Blood by Holly Jackson. This is the second book in the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. So this one is set after the first book, after the podcast for the first book has gone sort of viral. And in this book, our main character Pip decides to take on a missing persons case and try to solve it. I liked this one. I gave it 5 stars. I think I liked it just as much as the first book. It's very compelling. I think I read this one on the plane and in the airport on my way to holiday, and I just didn't stop. I just read it for like 4 or 5 hours straight and read it cover to cover, and it's good. It's really good. People kept telling me these books get darker, and honestly, I think people just don't read enough thrillers if they think this is really dark, and if they think the third book was really dark, it's really I liked it. It wasn't as good as the first one, but it still deserved 5 stars because the first one just really sorry Maggie the first one really blew me away, but this one was still fun, still engaging. I really liked Pip. I liked that we got some new side characters and we got to find out more secrets about people in the town. So yeah, overall, really, really good read. Love this series. If you're looking for a new thriller series, this is one to pick up. Then I read Mooncakes by Suzanne Walker and Wendy Zhu. This is a graphic novel. It is a sapphic fantasy romance, and unfortunately I didn't like this one. For me, Mooncakes felt really short, and I'm struggling to tell you what it was about because I don't feel like the book it really did that very well. As far as I could tell, it is about a witch who is living with, I think they were her aunts who were witches, and they run like the secret witchy library, and then one day her friend who is a werewolf shows up after being missing for a while, and they have to like defeat some kind of demon or something. I don't really know. This is my problem. Mooncakes made me feel like I had picked up volume 2, and I continuously checked, and everywhere I found said this was volume 1. This was like, or it was like a compendium, and there was no prequel, there was nothing before this, so there was absolutely zero world building, no introduction to who anybody was, what anything was going on, and I just didn't understand. I just found it really confusing. I thought the art style was beautiful, and I absolutely loved the illustration. I loved that, and I liked the characters. I loved that it was sapphic, but I just found the story really confusing. It felt really poorly written to me. I just couldn't tell you what it was about, what the point was, why I should care, why it was a big deal. There just was not enough. It needed like a whole other book before it to give you the setup of why anything was happening. Then I read As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson, which is the final book in the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder trilogy. This one, I should be able to hold it up because I have a physical copy somewhere, but I have a feeling I never actually dug it out of my TBR to put back on the shelves. So I'll unearth it one day. The reason I didn't read it physically is because I was on holiday, like I said, when I read the first book, and I loved it so much I wanted to read book 3 straight away, so I bought it on my Kindle and read it that way. But yeah, now I don't know where the physical copy is, weirdly. Sorry, over there is my TBR card, that's why I'm looking in that direction. But I'm sure it will surface at some point. So, as I said, this is the 3rd book in the Good Girls Guide to Murder series, and in this one, Pip is being stalked by what she thinks is a serial killer, and the twist is this serial killer is supposedly in prison. So she's trying to figure out what's happened and who the serial killer really is and if they are trying to stalk her. So for me, this one only got 4 stars. I can't tell you too much without giving spoilers, but this is a book in 2 parts. The first part I really enjoyed, and I wish that was the whole book really, or like more like 80% of the book, and that the second half was skinny down a bit and not as dramatic. This is the book that people told me got really, really dark, and I could not disagree more. It was not that dark. Like, it really wasn't. Maybe I just read too many like dark books or watch too much Criminal Minds, but it just wasn't that dark to me. Like, it was dark, yes, but I was expecting something really weird. But No, to me it was kind of standard thriller. But anyway, I liked it, but I just felt that the two halves were very disjointed and it felt very out of character for Pip. I did enjoy watching, not enjoy, but I thought it was good, the progression of her sort of like mental illness as the book progresses and how she's impacted by the stories that she's looking into and the feedback she gets from the public and that kind of stuff. And we get to see how different people in her town react to her. It was really weird reading a book like this set somewhere very near to where I live. Because all the like places that she talks about I know and many I have been to, so that was very strange. But yeah, I liked it. It was still a 4-star read. I still really enjoyed it, but yeah, it just missed a little something for me, and I think it's because we didn't really get either half done to justice, and I felt like I just was not as invested in it, and I didn't think it was as necessary as it kind of seemed. It's really hard to speak about this without giving spoilers, but some people had said to me they felt like it was unrealistic for a sixth former to do, but she's 18 years old in this book, and I kind of think this stuff could have been done by her. Like, I think it's very well explained how a person of that age could have done what she did in this book, so I don't think it was unrealistic, it just wasn't as enjoyable as books 1 and 2. Then I read Maggie Moves On by Lucy Score. This was a 4-star read for me, and it's an adult contemporary romance, and honestly it was a contender for best of the month, but Love and Gelato just did something to my brain more than this book did. So this one is about Maggie, who has a YouTube channel all around DIY and home renovation, and the whole thing of the channel is that she goes, buys a house, renovates it, and films herself in weekly episodes renovating the house, and at the end she sells it, moves on to the next house, and repeat basically. And she has just arrived in this big old lake house. It's her biggest project yet. It was like very, very expensive. It will be a multi-million house when it sells, and she is interviewing for contractors to help her, and that is when she meets Sai, and Sai is going to be her landscaper, but he also is determined that he is going to end up in a relationship with her. So it is about their flirtation while they're building this house, but also about Maggie just starting to question whether she actually wants to stick to this lifestyle of moving constantly, being on the road constantly, and not having a solid base and a place to call home. I loved it. It was really sweet. This is a 2 to 3 chilies sort of scenario, so there's a couple of sex scenes that are fairly graphic, but a lot of more closed door and innuendo stuff going on. It's not super steamy. So this is kind of like a romance sweet spot for me, where it's not too steamy, but just a lovely cozy read. I really liked this. I loved Maggie. She was very independent, and there was definitely a point being made that she was a hands-on lead of these renovations. She wasn't just talking. And I liked Silas. He was very cheeky, very funny, and he is kind of a bit of a grandpa in terms of like not knowing how to use any technology, and him trying to learn how to use it so that he can get with Maggie was really cute. And I also loved the plot points of he obviously features in the weekly episodes about the house they're renovating, and the internet falling in love with him because he's hot is really funny. His dog is really cute. It just was really cute. The reason it wasn't quite a 5-star for me was I felt like at times Silas was a little bit toxic, overprotective, heavy-handed, but still I really enjoyed this one. I'd highly recommend it, and yeah, it's a new favourite romance for me. Then we have The Cheat Sheet by Sarah Adams. This one was a complete surprise. This is another 4-star read for me. It is an adult contemporary romance, and this one was only a 1 chili, which to me is a closed door romance. So you know there are sex scenes happening, but you are not invited to them. So this one is about Nathan and Bree, who are best friends. They have been since they were in high school. Nathan is now an NFL player, and then Bree owns her own ballet studio, which is a non-profit studio to get people with lower incomes into ballet. This is about them deciding to fake date after Bree makes a sort of compromising confession to a journalist while drunk, and starting to wonder whether maybe they should make the fake dating real. I liked it. It was cute. Again, these were 2 really perfect holiday romances, really sweet, cozy and cute. I liked the dynamic between these 2. They were very, like, I don't know, sassy towards each other. They were very funny. You could see how comfortable they were. There was no like getting to know each other stage, which I really enjoyed. But it did feel a little bit icky at times. The reason why I didn't give it 5 stars is because it was a friends to lovers romance where it felt like he was mistreating his previous girlfriends because he was in love with her, and like he was being unfair to previous girlfriends because of her, and I didn't like that element. But if you can look past that, it is a really lovely romance. And the final book I'm going to talk to you about is K-Pop Confidential by Stefan Lee. This is a YA contemporary. I know, another one, what am I doing? But this was a holiday read again, and this is a 4-star read for me. So this one is about Candice, who is a Korean American girl, and she attends an open audition for a K-pop company and gets picked as the only person in the entirety of America to go over to train as part of one of their K-pop trainees in their program. And she manages to convince her parents to go, and the whole point is at the end of this summer there is going to be a new K-pop girl group debuting, and if she can get into it, her parents will let her go. But while she's there's obviously one big rule for all K-pop trainees and stars, and that is no dating, and that is something that she struggles with. But it's also about the realities of K-pop traineeships and discusses a lot of the good and bad, but a lot of the ugly stuff around the K-pop industry and the trainee industry. It's a hard-hitting book. It's not particularly joyful. You don't see a lot of the positives, but I think it's very real. And you can see kind of the highs she gets when she gets something right and she succeeds, but also all the lows where people are commenting on her body, on her skills, putting her down, threatening to kick her out all the time, and being separated, and also seeing that the boys are being allowed to eat a lot more than the girls and that kind of stuff. It's very heavy hitting, but I did enjoy it. The reason it didn't get 5 stars is I felt like the romance was very forced and unnecessary. There's meant to be kind of a love triangle, Maggie. There's meant to be kind of a love triangle going on, but I didn't really see it for either of them. So yeah, it is a really good read if you're into K-pop and you want to explore more about the realities of what being a trainee is like, but do remember it is not written by someone who has been a trainee, so you have to consider that as well. So those are all the books that I'm going to talk to you about today. I hope you had a fantastic reading month in April like me. I read a real mixture of books, some really, really good ones and a few that weren't so good, but I definitely found a couple of new favourites that I'm really happy about, and I finished a series, which is great. So let me know in the comments what your favourite reads of April were, and if you read any of these books, what you thought about them. And that is it from me. So thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing to see more content from me, and all of my social media links are in the description below. If you would like to leave me a comment to let me know you are here, please leave me a beach related emoji in the comments below. Thank you again for watching. Bye.